and welcome to BingeBot. We recap all the latest and greatest TV shows to keep you in the loop. It's time for the sophomore season of Netflix's international hit Squid Game, where our hero Gi-hun winds up in another round of potentially fatal games, all while he works to expose the evil organizers in charge of the competition. Let's kick things off with Episode 1, Bread and Lottery. Having won the competition and earned 45.6 billion South Korean won, around 39 million US dollars, Seong Gi-hun is warned by the game's organizers that it's in his best interest to simply use the money to start a new life. But instead, he decides to take it upon himself to stop the savagery of the games he competed in once and for all. Upon walking away from the plane that would have taken him to his daughter in the US, he receives a threatening call from the frontman, the overseer of the games, and realizing that he's being watched, Gi-hun swears to find the frontman before returning to Seoul. There, in a random public restroom, Gi-hun realizes that there's a tracking device implanted behind his left ear, removes it with a box cutter, setting himself free to make good on his threats. Meanwhile, former detective Hwang Jun-ho wakes up in a hospital, having survived falling off a cliff and into the sea after being shot by the frontman, who turned out to be Hwang Jun-ho, Jun-ho's own brother. 3 years pass, and Jun-ho now works as a traffic warden of his own volition after his superiors gave up on helping him find the island the games are played on. This is due to the fact that the evidence Jun-ho gathered while previously infiltrating the games was lost at sea, and without it, the authorities' hands are tied. By comparison, Gi-hun remains hyper-focused on finding proof of the horrors that he endured, still plagued by nightmares of the frontman and the friends he lost violently to the games. Holed up in an empty motel, Gi-hun meets with Kim Jong-rae, the loan shark he owed a steep debt to before joining the games. And using his prize money, Gi-hun clears his debt and hires Mr. Kim and his men to track down the recruiter for the games in one fell swoop. Days pass to no avail until, by chance, Mr. Kim and his right-hand man, Choi Woo-sok, spot the recruiter playing the traditional Korean game Dokji, a game where players attempt to flip their opponent's paper tile using their own, with some poor soul in a train station. Keeping on his tail, Mr. Kim and Woo-sok follow the recruiter to a park, where he offers the homeless people there the choice between a bread roll or a scratch card. Predictably, the majority choose the scratch cards and they end up losing, leading them to watch all the bread that they rejected be crushed beneath the unhinged recruiter's shoes, who looks to show them that their actions have consequences. Rushing to the scene, Gi-hun is pulled over for speeding and written up by Jun-ho's partner. After running his ID, however, Jun-ho realizes who Gi-hun is and recognizes that he's the thread that could link him back to the games. While stalking the recruiter, Mr. Kim and Woo-sok's attempts to subdue him result in their own capture, causing them to find themselves tied up and forced to play a variation of the classic game called Rock, Paper, Scissors -1. In this version, each player makes a sign with both hands, removes one hand, and the remaining sign determines the outcome of the game. Additionally, there's a Russian roulette twist to the game, which ends tragically as Mr. Kim ultimately sacrifices himself and loses the game on purpose to save Woo-sok's life. After torturing Woo-sok, the recruiter learns Gi-hun's exact location and waits for him in his motel room, where they sit at a table opposite each other, allowing the recruiter to level his revolver at Gi-hun. Not afraid, Gi-hun presses his forehead against it unflinchingly, even when the recruiter pulls the trigger, thankfully on an empty chamber. Impressed by Gi-hun's mettle, the recruiter invites him to play Russian roulette with the added stakes of not spitting the chamber after each shot. Bringing it down to the final 2 clicks, the recruiter informs Gi-hun that he has a key in his pocket that would allow him to contact the frontman, a key Gi-hun could instantly obtain by turning the gun on the recruiter and killing him. However, to do so, Gi-hun first must admit that he's a piece of trash, just like everyone else. Preferring to die with his honor intact, Gi-hun bravely holds the gun to his own head and takes the risk. Fortunately, the gun clicks empty, leaving a lone bullet in the final chamber for the recruiter.
지금 그 총으로 절 쏘시고 그걸 가져가시면 돼요. 다만 이거 하나만 인정하시면 됩니다. 너도 다른 놈들이랑 똑같은 쓰레기야.
Generously, Gi-hun presents the same offer. The recruiter can turn the gun on Gi-hun and take his life to save his own, but only at the cost of admitting that he's nothing more than a lapdog to the game's masters. And rather than prove Gi-hun's point and face his truth, the recruiter puts the gun to his chin and pulls the trigger, resulting in his death. Episode 2, Halloween Party. Having traced Gi-hun, Jun-ho arrives at his motel just in time to hear a gunshot, and rushing inside, Jun-ho finds Woo-sak tied up on a bed and forces him to give him Gi-hun's room number. Finding Gi-hun holding a gun in the room with a dead man, Jun-ho understandably assumes that Gi-hun was the one who fired the bullet and attempts to arrest him, but in the nick of time, Woo-sak escapes his bonds and rushes to Gi-hun's aid, knocking Jun-ho unconscious with a fire extinguisher. Wanting to finally confront the frontman, Gi-hun looks for a key in the recruiter's pocket, which turns out to be an invitation card for a Halloween event at Club HDH. When Jun-ho regains consciousness, he finds himself handcuffed in the bathtub and is forced to explain who he is to ease Gi-hun's paranoia. Regardless, when questioned about the frontman and if he's ever seen his face, Jun-ho lies and says he's only seen him wearing his signature black mask, not wanting to reveal that the frontman is actually his brother.
그놈을 알아? 가면들은 그 자를 대장이라고 불러. 얼굴을 봤어? 아니, 얼굴은 몰라. 검은 가면 쓰고 있었어.
Seeing that he and Jun-ho share the goal of wanting to take down the games, Gi-hun shows him his massive stack of prize money and the armory that he's procured. After having a tracker planted inside a fake tooth in his mouth, Gi-hun arrives at Club HDH, while Jun-ho waits outside with a squad of ex-military mercenaries as backup. Recognizing Gi-hun, a pink guard emerges from the crowd of Halloween costumes and leads Gi-hun out back and into a white limousine. Through the speakers of a golden pig, the front man personally questions Gi-hun's plans and why he'd want to dismantle a game that people participate in willingly, leading them into a conversation about humanity's worth. During this debate, Jun-ho and his squad lose contact with Gi-hun, and all attempts to tail the limo are foiled by the front man's snipers by blowing out their tires. Realizing that he fell into a trap, Gi-hun pleads his last resort and asks to be sent back into the games where he can prove once and for all that the game's organizers are wrong about the nature of humans.
게임을 하게 해줘.
게임을 하겠다고.
다시 게임을 하게 해줘.
Hesitantly, the front man agrees and promptly releases sleeping gas into the limo. Around the same time across the city, another tragic story unfolds, as Kang Nol has managed to flee from North to South Korea, but at the excruciating cost of leaving her newborn daughter behind. Advised that the search for her child is fruitless, Nol numbs herself with pills and alcohol when a card for the games is silently handed through the window of the car that she lives in. Accepting the invitation, Nol steps into a furnished truck, and heading straight to room 11, she zips into a pink jumpsuit and pulls a triangle mask over her face, revealing her to be one of the murderous pink soldiers. Episode 3, 001. Though prepared, Gi-hun's still shaken to wake up as player 456 in the bright dormitory once more, where the only thing that's changed are the surrounding faces and the murals on the wall. As the pink guards announce themselves, explaining the situation to the rowdy crowd, a large piggy bank lowers from the ceiling, empty, but expected to be filled with 45.6 billion won, the equivalent of around 31 million US dollars by the end of this year's edition of the games. In order to make the players feel like they have freedom of choice, the soldiers also reveal that after each game, the players will get to vote on whether to continue playing or not. If the majority votes to stop playing, the total prize money at that time gets split equally between all players. With that reassurance, everyone signs their participation consent forms and heads out to the first game, where Gi-hun unexpectedly reunites with his close friend and former gambling partner, Park Jung-bae, who was lured there by his own staggering debt. Calling upon the help of Captain Park, the sea captain who pulled him from the water 3 years ago and assisted in his search for the island, Jun-ho and his squad load up the boat with guns, ammo, and tactical equipment. Following Gi-hun's tracker, they know exactly where to go this time. Nonetheless, as Jun-ho and his squad grow closer to the signal of the tracker and send their drones ahead in preparation to go ashore, they are faced with a chilling twist as they find the tracker in a random fisherman's bait container, revealing that the game's organizers knew about Gi-hun's tracker, extracted it, and used it to mislead Jun-ho. Trapped in the familiar red light, green light arena, Gi-hun also realizes far too late that his tracker was removed and there's no one coming to save them. Channeling that dread into determination, he attempts to inform the other players they have to move fast when the giant doll at the other end of the field yells green light, but if they move an inch when she yells red light, they will die.
무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다 하다가 죽는다고?
무화꽃이
예, 맞습니다. 움직이다 걸리면 죽습니다.
Naturally, his advice falls on deaf ears, but they all choke swiftly on their skepticism when a bee lands on player 196, causing her to flail frantically and receive a sniper bullet to the head.
너한테 벌이 안 졌어.
In a futile scramble to escape, many meet the same fate. Listening to Gi-hun's instructions now, those still standing form single-file lines for their own safety, and while some still fail, an unprecedented number of players cross the finish line. Despite Gi-hun and player 120 Cho Hyun-ju dragging the wounded player 444 to safety, Noel ends up shooting him clean anyways. When asked by another sniper why she did that, she explains that she just wanted to get rid of a loser who couldn't even cross the finish line on his own. Once back in their dormitory, the remaining players beg the pink guards for their lives and call for the aforementioned vote. However, enticed by the millions funneling into the prize pot, too many people vote to keep playing, which forces Gi-hun to admit that he's played these games before and the outcome will be a lot worse than any of them could imagine. This admission ends up backfiring though, as the other players' spirits are lifted and they begin to rejoice at having a previous champion on their side to give them winning strategies. Nonetheless, the vote is evenly split until the final player, 001, chooses to continue playing the game. As half of the room celebrates and the other half grieves, all of them are entirely unaware that player 1 is in fact the frontman himself, Hwang Jun-ho, unmasked and seemingly ready to control the game from within. Episode 4: 6 Legs. Manipulating Gi-hun from the get-go, Jun-ho proclaims him as the reason he voted to stay, and coaxes Gi-hun into telling the gathering crowd about the second game, Dalgona, where certain shapes are to be carved from a honeycomb without breaking it. That night, Jun-ho apologizes to Gi-hun and explains that his pregnant wife was diagnosed with acute cirrhosis and needs a new liver, hence his determination to win the games. Beneath the compound, a handful of pink guards continue their secret operation to harvest organs from the eliminated contestants. To ensure the quality of the organs, they need players alive, which Noel has actively worked against by killing player 444 even though she shouldn't have, revealing that her motives were actually to protect him by putting him out of his misery. Such insubordination isn't tolerated though, and Noel finds herself before the corrupt officer, the frontman's right-hand man. 7 years ago, the officer gave Noel a fresh start after her miraculous crossing of the demarcation line on her own. However, the promises he made then of helping those in need don't align with his current orders, which is why she refuses to follow them. On the mainland, Jun-ho and Woo-sak gather more mercenaries to split between 2 boats, planning to find the island themselves before the week's end. Believing that the next game is going to be Dalgona, Gi-hun heads into it believing that he'll be able to help the other players, only to be shocked when he finds out that the games have changed, causing many of the players to be infuriated with him. In this new game, the players are to run a 6-legged pentathlon in groups of 5. With their legs cuffed together and 5 minigames to complete every 10 meters, players must make it across the finish line before the 5-minute timer runs out. Starting with Dokji, the minigames progress to Flying Stone, where players have to throw a stone to knock over another, Gonggi, won by tossing and grabbing each stone consecutively before catching all 5 at once, Spinning Top, where a thread is wound around the toy and thrown to make the top spin on its tip, and Jeggi, a weighted toy that must be kicked 5 times in a row while in the air. Jun-ho, wanting to save Gi-hun from the wrath of those who have been counting on his insider knowledge, forms a team with him along with Jung-bae, ex-marine Kang Dae-ho, and heavily pregnant Kim Jun-hee. As they watch, the first 2 teams end up being gunned down as the time runs out before they can make it to the finish line. During cleanup, Noel notices a surviving contestant's coffin getting marked with a near-invisible cross for harvesting. Pulling her authority over the circle workers, she has them reopen the lid for her to kill the man before he meets a far grislier fate below. Despite the horrifying end of the first round, Hyun-ju and her team try to remain composed, and as the countdown for round 2 starts, they spring into action with a rapid, determined launch. Episode 5: One More Game. Proving to the other contestants that the minigames can be won, Hyun-ju's team fly through the challenges with not a second to spare, and cross the finish line to a chorus of cheers from their fellow competitors.
성공.
Despite their dwindling numbers, morale remains high enough to see Gi-hun and his team through the first few minigames without a hitch. Upon reaching Spinning Top, however, Jun-ho begins to fumble and their time grows precariously thin until he manages to spin it thanks to Gi-hun's encouragement. In the next game, as if to make up for his mistakes, Jun-ho uses their shackled feet to help Gi-hun hit the Jeggi 5 times and ultimately wins them the game. After delivering the results of the game to the remaining contestants, the pink guards bring out the voting pod. And blinded by the thrill of victory and the growing prize total above their heads, which is now up to 20.1 billion won, 139 people choose to stay for one more game, utterly betraying the 116 people who wish to desperately go home. Defeated by the outcome, Gi-hun contemplates their next steps. With no way of knowing what the next game entails, his team's immediate focus is surviving the night, as he knows from his last time playing the games that contestants will begin killing each other, understanding that the more contestants are eliminated, the higher the prize money goes. For this reason, they sleep beneath the bunks, and Gi-hun keeps watch for any opportunistic attackers. After successfully surviving until morning, the players are rudely awakened by the announcement of the third game starting momentarily. With some of them still rubbing sleep from their eyes, they're brought to a circular room with 50 doors and a merry-go-round in the center. Called Mingle, the aim of this game is to stand on the merry-go-round until it stops spinning and a random number is pulled. Within 30 seconds, players must form a group that matches the number and enter one of the surrounding rooms. Should a player fail to enter the room, or if the group within is more or less than the number called, they will be eliminated. Episode 6, OX. For the first round, the number 10 is called, and a good majority of players are able to find a room to hunker down in until the door unlocks. One of the fallen contestants from round 1, wounded but not dead, is placed into a marked coffin. Having been jumped in her room the night prior and threatened with mutilation or worse if she keeps interfering with a secret organ harvesting operation, Noel's forced to look away and remain silent. In the next few rounds of the game, the numbers are called low, and the squeeze of pressure forces a split between teams, friends, and family. By the final round, Gi-hun and his team are still fully accounted for. As the number 2 is called, In-ho and Jung-bae barrel into a room already occupied by a terrified player. To Jung-bae's horror, In-ho breaks the man's neck before their time runs out, saving both his and Jung-bae's lives. With only 100 players left, their next vote in the dormitory reaches a solid 50-50 split, meaning that another vote will be held the next day. Growing desperate, Gi-hun suggests forcibly recruiting players to change their votes, but In-ho warns him against the violent turn that could take, for those who choose to stay have been warped by greed and are firm in their decision to win or die trying. Meanwhile, Jun-ho's search leads him to an island with a mysterious latch hidden among the trees. Upon further investigation, the hatch explodes, killing a member of his team, and proving to Jun-ho that the frontman is still 2 steps ahead of them at each turn. Back in the dormitory, the remaining players are each given a fork with their evening meals, and Gi-hun grapples with the idea of killing just one person on the other side to swing the vote and save the rest. Unfortunately, he's not the only one savvy to the idea, and tensions boil over in the men's bathroom, where an impromptu brawl initially between Lee Myung-gi and the rapper known as Thanos escalates into another fierce and bloody fight for survival between the O and X camps. Unfortunately for Thanos, Myung-gi proves determined to get rid of his bully once and for all, and stabs him several times with the fork that they got earlier, killing Thanos right then and there, and wrapping up his Infinity Saga. Episode 7, Friend or Foe. In lieu of the sudden savagery, 5 players are eliminated, and more money falls into the prize pot. Should the remaining players stick to their original votes, the recount will definitely end the games, but Gi-hun knows the players who want to continue will attack his side to ensure that they're the majority. Thinking strategically, Gi-hun plans to use the imminent chaos among the players to ambush the pink guards, and motivated, he begins to rally his team and directs their focus to the real enemy, the games' organizers.
그놈들, 이 게임을 만든 놈들, 우리가 싸워야 한다면 그놈들과 싸워야 합니다.
However, a risk so great requires equal sacrifice, and Gi-hun makes the ice-cold decision to let a handful of players kill each other off for a final shot at turning the tide for good. As this unfolds, a storm roils the sea and very literally rocks Jun-ho and his team's boat. Sick from the rough conditions, one of the mercenaries takes to the main deck and finds Captain Park tampering with a drone. Upon questioning, Park stabs the man and throws him overboard, revealing that Park is in fact an informant for the frontman. At the end of the night, as the lights go out and a surge of primal brutality sweeps over the dormitory, Gi-hun and his team lie low beneath the bunks and simply wait for it to all be over. Once the pink guards rush in to break up the fighting, they play dead until the guards crouch to scan their bodies, creating a window of opportunity to strike. Caught unaware, all but one of the pink guards fall or retreat, leaving Gi-hun and his team with a prisoner, a spread of guns, and a fresh hope that they can win. With a gun to his head, the captured guard leads him to the management area, but before he can use his mask to open the doors, he's shot dead by an onslaught of pink soldiers sent to stop the rebellion. Leaving Hyun-ju to command the squad and buy time, Gi-hun swipes up the guard's mask and takes Jung-bae in search of the game's control room. However, both groups are met with heavy resistance that quickly eats through their ammo. Splitting up, In-ho takes 2 men to support Gi-hun, while Dae-ho rushes back to the dormitory for the rest of their ammo. Once there, Dae-ho surrenders to fear, choosing to hide among the bunks and abandon his squad. While the struggle to reach the control room continues, Gi-hun takes a safe shot to the arm, and In-ho moves to flank the soldiers from behind. There, In-ho finally reveals his true colors and kills the men he brought for backup without mercy. Speaking to Gi-hun through a radio, In-ho makes it sound as though he and the 2 others are dying in a hail of bullets coming from the pink soldiers, before cutting communication with Gi-hun and instead contacting the control room, declaring it's time to wrap things up. With the entire plan in shambles and his friends dying left and right, Gi-hun surrenders at the approach of the frontman and the officer. As direct punishment to Gi-hun for trying to play the hero, the frontman shoots Jung-bae in the chest and walks away, breaking Gi-hun's heart at the loss of his most loyal friend. Even worse, the game's announcer declares Jung-bae's death as merely another player's elimination, indicating that the games will continue as if nothing happened, rendering all of Gi-hun's efforts so far meaningless. And that's it for Squid Game Season 2. Yet again, the chips are down for Gi-hun. His life is in imminent danger, and only time will tell if he has the strength to become champion once more. Looks like we're gonna have to wait until Season 3 to see what happens, but we'll be here and ready to recap it, so be sure to check back soon. Thanks again for watching this recap and for sticking around until the end. As always, if you guys want to support our channel, you can do so via YouTube memberships, Patreon, or Buy Me a Coffee, and unlock some cool perks along the way. We'll be back soon with another recap, but until then, BingeBot is logging off.